Welcome to JK Tells a Story, where real-life dramas unfold. Sit back and enjoy today's tale. Marcus Brennan sat on the back deck, watching the sun sink into the Atlantic. Perhaps they should have made this move years ago. The beauty and tranquility of this place were mesmerizing. Here meant Sunder Island, a small piece of land off the coast of Maine. For most of their 22 years of marriage, Marcus's wife Lydia had hinted, cajoled, and finally persuaded him to leave Boston for this place where she and countless generations of her family had grown up. Improved communications, technology, and finally remote work had allowed him to handle enough business from home to make it viable, with trips to the city limited to once a month. Lydia, while living in Boston, had regularly returned to the island to visit family and friends, and most importantly, to see her mother. They had bought the house from Lydia's cousin 2 years ago but only moved in 6 months ago. In the meantime, Lydia had spent her visits making repairs, using it as a base after the major renovation work was completed. The house faced west over the bay and had a spectacular sunset that Marcus admired while sipping a cold beer. The property was an old farmhouse, and there were still meadows and orchards nearby. It looked like a few new trees had been planted, no doubt part of Lydia's landscaping efforts the previous spring. Trees and orchards seemed to be a feature of the entire island, and Marcus wondered if they were intended to provide shelter from the strong ocean breezes, or more likely, to produce the much-loved hard cider of the locals. He had to admit it was a good move. Lydia was right. It was a different pace of life among tight-knit circles, many of whom were Lydia's relatives. Lydia was happy to be back home and seemed to know everyone on the island. As an outsider, Marcus felt a certain reserve from the locals, but he liked their straightforward manner. The way everyone pulled together was impressive, and he wondered if it had something to do with the self-reliance necessary for the survival of a small island community. Marcus had met Lydia at university. Both had studied business. Lydia majored in marketing and Marcus in new technologies. They had developed a strong relationship and married shortly after graduating, deciding to live in Boston for better career opportunities. They'd been married for 22 years, but Marcus still thought Lydia was beautiful. Over time, her hair had become shorter, now pulled back in a low bun at the nape of her neck, and golden highlights had been added to her natural blonde. He knew she worried about the 42 pounds she had gained over the years, but he liked that her figure had become softer, her hips and chest more curved. Her eyes remained unchanged, blue-gray with golden flecks in the irises. Unlike Marcus, she never looked disheveled or wore sweatpants, maintaining a classic, put-together appearance. He had never seen his wife so happy, so engaged in the life of the island, constantly participating in the work of one committee or another. Her current project involved organizing a summer solstice festival. Their 2 daughters, Savannah and Bethany, had been born soon after the wedding, had grown up, and now attended the University of Vermont. This had been another factor that prompted Marcus and Lydia to move. Judging by their social media, the girls were enjoying college life to the fullest, but Marcus was confident they had time to get all their coursework done, though Savannah tended to leave everything until the last minute. Marcus was interested in the history of the island and enjoyed listening to old fishing stories at the local pub. There were several old books published that gave a sense of the island's history. These were kept in a small schoolhouse that served as a library, as well as the town hall and venue for all social events. Marcus had looked through the attic of their house for the first time, thinking he might find something more about the history of the place. Mostly there were old beds, furniture, and toys. While digging around, he found an old box containing a handwritten manuscript titled Tales from the Island. He made out the author's name, Eleanor Whitmore, and immediately recognized it as his wife's maiden name. He sat down on a wicker stool and began leafing through. The handwriting was beautiful, a traditional script with swirls and flourishes, and the content was a mixture of stories and the author's personal experiences, passed down through generations. Marcus's attention was drawn to drawings of trees as he flipped through the pages. His eyes skimmed over the content. Some of it was faded and hard to see, but he could catch snippets. This European tradition has its roots dating back to 1287. It was then, during the reign of the Plantagenets, that the law of the first night, also known as jus primi noctis, was applied as part of the marriage license. The ruling lord had the right to spend the first night with any new bride within his lands. Marcus could remember a similar reference in the William Wallace movie starring Mel Gibson, but he was sure that was a myth, conveniently picked up by Hollywood to add a little voyeurism and excitement to the film's plot. He continued reading. Seeing the suffering this caused the groom, in order to prevent any attempt at murderous revenge, the female elders spent one night with the groom. Over time, this evolved into one of the older women being with the groom to ensure some parity for the couple. For 2.5 pages, the manuscript detailed how the plague had dominated colonial life, wiping out populations. The island was not immune to the disease, and there were many deaths. Following a severe epidemic in 1622, there were concerns that the island's population might not be sustainable, and abandonment was seriously considered. Sometime after this, stories appeared about the exchange of partners on April Fool's Day. This was associated with efforts to repopulate the island, and widows were encouraged to seek partners among young men. At the outbreak of the Great War, almost all the men on the island enlisted in the U.S. Army. Many young men did not return, so changes were made to the island's tradition to provide young, unmarried men going to war with a companion before conscription. This practice was resumed to a lesser extent during the Second World War. The text went on to detail Eleanor's own experiences in the 1950s. The arrival of outsiders and the displacement of people undermine the tradition, but it still exists among some families. The elders insist that this is a tradition and that it has value. Married women who have raised children are offered the opportunity to guide a young man who has reached the age of 18. For the young men, it relieves all the anxieties and pressure associated with their first experience. They also receive guidance from an experienced woman and become better husbands in the future. Divorce is unheard of on the island. This tradition has also reduced the likelihood of unwanted teenage pregnancies. For women, it is seen as a form of community service, with a hint of reward after years of hard work raising children. The tradition also reduced the influence of empty nest syndrome and the likelihood of affairs. Eleanor went on to talk about her own role in the tradition with a young gentleman who had reached the age of 18, at which time she was 46, while her husband was busy with business. A young man named Daniel was working on their property, planting trees as a sign of renewal as part of the festival. His reward was time with Eleanor. The text gave the impression that Eleanor's husband knew but never spoke about this arrangement. She described Daniel's development from a shy and awkward teenager to a confident young man. She described guiding him patiently through that week and how his confidence had grown. It wasn't just physical. She had explained to him her feelings and desires, as well as the important aspects of maintaining a successful relationship. Marcus shook his head. Wow, what a story. He began to wonder how much of this was true. He could see some logic in the historical references, but everything seemed too far-fetched. All of this could be the author's imagination, or perhaps she had used it to justify something. He set the manuscript aside. A few months later, Marcus was planning when he needed to return to Boston for work. Lydia had a long shopping list she wanted him to complete, so he decided it would be best to add an extra day for that and another to see old friends. If he went after the festival, he could return by the following Saturday. Lydia was thrilled, no doubt because Marcus would be there to help with the festival preparations and because he had agreed to do her shopping. The festival day involved the entire island. The day focused on children's games and sports, with dancing and drinks planned for the adults in the evening. As the evening program began, Marcus was introduced to some of the island's residents he had not yet met, including Thomas Hayes, his wife Margaret, and their son Garrett, whom Marcus thought was close to his younger daughter's age. Garrett Hayes introduced himself with a rather formal handshake, which was a little odd, but the moment soon passed. Along with the Whitmores, the Hayes family was one of the island's oldest families. Marcus felt like an outsider again as Lydia and the Hayes family discussed old family connections. Later in the evening, Marcus noticed a group of young men looking at Lydia. He couldn't blame them. Lydia looked stunning in the summer dress she'd chosen, which certainly showed off her figure. The looks continued, which began to irritate Marcus. He was about to approach, but Lydia's mother beat him to it, sending the young men hurrying back toward the cider bar. Marcus laughed at himself. thinking they must be a little intimidated by Lydia's mother, Virginia. On the other hand, he couldn't blame them for staring. She was a formidable woman and the leader of the Council of Elders. Marcus could see where Lydia got her looks. Virginia Whitmore remained a striking woman, more like Lydia's older sister than her mother. He returned to watch the dancing, which seemed to involve all ages. Marcus could feel the effects of the hard cider but decided he could handle more. Everyone seemed to be in the same mood, and it took him forever to get another drink. When he returned, he didn't see Lydia and began to look around. He was surprised to find her sitting at a table talking with Garrett Hayes, who quickly moved away when Marcus approached. "What's going on?" Marcus asked. "Garrett is interested in doing some landscaping work. I was asking about options and costs," Lydia said. "Do we need work done?" "Yes, and there's a tradition of planting and renewing trees around the time of the festival. So it'll be perfect." The mention of trees brought back memories of the manuscript Marcus had read a few weeks ago. "So Garrett will plant trees?" "Yes, he can start next week." Lydia looked at Marcus. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Marcus answered slowly. "What will Garrett get in return?" "Money, of course, but we haven't agreed on the amount yet." "Would you provide any other services in exchange for his work?" "What are you suggesting, Marcus?" He continued. "So this has nothing to do with the traditions of the island?" Lydia hissed. "What traditions?" "You know very well. The tradition of the solstice. You're planning to sleep with Garrett Hayes while I'm gone next week." Lydia burst into tears and ran away. Marcus stood there, stunned. Hell, what if he was wrong and had just falsely accused Lydia? He was already beginning to regret drinking so much. His mind was clouded and he couldn't think clearly. He began walking up the single-track road toward their house. He needed a walk to clear his head. The walk felt like the longest of his life. Maybe he had misunderstood something. Maybe he had overreacted to the story. When he arrived home, Lydia was not there. He collapsed on the sofa, alcohol and fatigue finally getting the better of him, and he fell asleep. The next morning, he noticed that Lydia had not returned home. He thought that she might have spent the night with her lover, but he suspected she was with her mother. This suspicion was confirmed when Lydia and Virginia appeared at the door. Her mother led the conversation, not backing down, and she launched a verbal attack on Marcus. There were so many words it was hard to keep track, but the gist of it was, how dare he talk to Lydia like that? How dare he upset her? Nothing good comes from marrying an outsider. He was never good enough for her, and so on. He let her speak, looking at Lydia's tear-filled eyes. Finally, he had enough and raised his hand, trying to get her mother to stop. "I have a simple question. Is there such a tradition? And are you planning to sleep with Garrett Hayes next week?" Lydia turned to her mother with a defeated look, and everything became clear to Marcus. "Yes, Marcus, some old families still practice the tradition, or at least part of it," Virginia said. "The Hayes family has requested the arrangement, and we are obliged to fulfill it. I asked Lydia to consider it. It's about a young man reaching maturity. The intimacy is purely educational in nature, about how to treat a woman correctly. This is not intimacy in the way you're thinking, and it's not an affair. This is a centuries-old tradition that has helped the island survive difficult times. It is an absolute requirement that we fulfill this role on behalf of the community. We have no youth crime, no divorces, just happy marriages and families with strong ties. You probably noticed this yourself." Marcus sighed. "So it's all true. Married women are entertaining young guys in the name of the public good." Virginia bristled. "Don't be so vulgar. You're an outsider and you don't understand how important this is to us. It's ingrained in every story we hear growing up here. If you were from here, you'd have received all the benefits at 18, and that would have made you a better man. I doubt you would have refused the offer." Marcus replied, "Now there are no ancient laws, plagues, or wars. You do it because you enjoy it. Tell me, Virginia, how many times have you played this role? An attractive woman like you was probably asked for several arrangements. I bet you've had quite a time over the years." Finally, Virginia seemed speechless, but then recovered. "Yes, I have fulfilled my duty several times, and I am proud of it," just as Lydia should be proud of her sacrifice. I'm asking you, Marcus, let Lydia do this. You can't understand how important it is to us. Marcus turned to his wife. So you want to do this? I think so. I'm ready to make this sacrifice, like my mother said. I want to become part of the community. No one was happy when I left for college, got married, didn't come back here, and didn't fulfill the responsibilities that fell to others. Marcus replied, So this is a sacrifice? You're not seeking this yourself? It seems strange, considering you were so happy that I was going to Boston. You seemed so excited. Lydia blushed, then continued, I just felt relieved that I could arrange everything and ensure that it wouldn't affect you, and it won't affect our marriage. Marcus, you need to understand that this is not an affair. It's community service. It's tradition. You're making too much of this. I don't see it that way. Virginia interjected, Marcus, you need to accept this. Lydia has a responsibility to the community. This is who we are. If you can't accept it, then perhaps you never truly understood what it meant for Lydia to return home. Marcus looked at both of them, feeling like he was in a nightmare. I need time to think. He walked out, leaving them standing in the kitchen. He spent the next hour walking along the shore, trying to process what he had just heard. Was this really happening? Was his wife seriously considering sleeping with an 18-year-old boy in the name of tradition? The rational part of his mind told him this was insane, but the emotional part was reeling from the betrayal. When he returned, Virginia was gone, and Lydia was sitting at the kitchen table, red-eyed. Marcus, please. We need to talk about this. What is there to talk about? You've already made up your mind. No, I haven't. I'm torn. I want to respect the tradition, but I don't want to hurt you. If you do this, Lydia, it's over. I won't accept it. Marcus, you're being unreasonable. This is bigger than us. This is about community, about tradition, about you sleeping with another man. Let's call it what it is. Lydia's face hardened. Fine. If that's how you see it, then maybe you should go to Boston and think about whether you can accept who I am and where I come from. Maybe I should. The next few weeks were tense. Lydia constantly apologized for even considering the arrangement and for asking Marcus to accept it. She said she was bound to the tradition by her mother and hadn't thought through the consequences. Marcus was in a dilemma about going to Boston for work. He couldn't put it off any longer, but the thought of leaving Lydia on the island terrified him. Lydia sensed his anxiety and insisted on going with him, taking time off from work. The rift with her mother grew even greater. They didn't speak, and Lydia never mentioned the tradition again. After much thought and worry, Marcus decided that he needed to trust Lydia and make the trip alone. Lydia again tried to convince Marcus that she could come with him, but he knew she was in the middle of working on a major marketing proposal and needed time to prepare. Lydia promised daily calls and frequent contact. Marcus went to Boston. Ferry, taxi, train, and subway meant that he was exhausted and collapsed on his hotel bed at 9 in the evening. He called Lydia, who answered quickly, and they exchanged details about his trip and what had changed in the city. During the long conversation, Boston seemed like an endless construction zone. After the call, Marcus immediately fell asleep, exhausted. He'd had a few stressful days at work, but felt refreshed. Being off the island had helped him clear his thoughts. He began to reflect on his relationship with Lydia and mentally replay some of their conversations. The woman who had been so intent on pursuing this arrangement with a younger man seemed as distant from the woman he'd married as possible, far from the caring mother of his children. He felt that Virginia had too much influence over her and was glad they'd had a falling out. Virginia had gone too far, and he hoped it would end there. Still, he couldn't come to terms with Lydia's initial willingness, and why she'd been so sure that this arrangement wouldn't affect their relationship. He wanted to trust her, wanted to believe her apologies were genuine, but something nagged at him. These thoughts continued to trouble him. Suddenly, remembering the trees that had been planted on their property the previous spring, Marcus froze. Lydia had been visiting the island regularly throughout the previous year. A feeling of horror came over him when he thought about who could have planted those trees. Perhaps she had fought so hard for the arrangement this time because she needed to justify her previous actions. He called Lydia, and she answered quickly again. Lydia, doesn't Garrett Hayes have an older brother? There was a pause before Lydia responded casually. Yes, I think so. Why are you asking? Even though your families go back a long way? There was a silence. Yes, Marcus. He has a brother named Colton. Marcus continued. He's about 19 now? Before she could answer, he said quietly. And last year, it was he who planted the trees? There was no answer. Marcus continued. And what did Colton Hayes get for this? Lydia recovered from her shock. Only money, Marcus. Their family is the only one on the island who does landscaping work. So you're not with Garrett Hayes right now as we speak? Lydia sighed. No, Marcus. I'm not with anyone. And you need to forget about this jealousy. Before she could say anything else, Marcus hung up. Calls from Lydia came repeatedly, but Marcus ignored them all. He needed time to think. He finally answered the phone on Friday morning, surprising Lydia. Marcus, thank God you answered. I was worried. Were you really? That was all Marcus said. Of course. I love you more than anything in the world. What time will you be back tomorrow? We need to talk about this. Marcus responded in a calm tone that worried Lydia. I won't be coming back. I'll stay here for a while. Lydia panicked. Please don't do this. We need to sort this out as soon as possible. Marcus responded again in an eerily calm tone. Oh, that's true. But you didn't rush to Boston to do it, and you only call me during the day. I understand your evenings have remained somewhat busy. Please, Marcus, come home. I didn't do anything. It's just your paranoia. Just come home and we can work things out. 5 days later, Marcus was returning to the island by ferry. When he reached the house, Lydia was already waiting for him with Virginia. Apparently, the message had been conveyed. Lydia tried to hug and kiss him, but Marcus pulled away from her. Lydia began to sob, and Virginia looked furious. Why are you here, Virginia? This only concerns me and Lydia. Do I understand correctly that you never had an argument? Before Virginia could answer, Lydia began to explain. We actually had a fight, but when you didn't come home, I needed someone and you weren't here. Marcus frowned. It's hard to believe that my mother-in-law would make peace with someone if she didn't get her way. Given her efforts to push this arrangement, I doubt she would back down. I assume you never fought, and it was all a cover. Lydia's eyes widened. This is getting out of control, Marcus. I didn't do anything. Marcus continued. So you both agreed to lie and hide it because I wouldn't approve. The argument continued, going in circles. Marcus was sure that Lydia had been unfaithful, but she denied everything. Eventually, he went into the spare room and left Lydia and Virginia alone. The next day, Marcus decided to meet with his father-in-law, Gerald Whitmore, knowing the conversation wouldn't be easy. They had always gotten along well, and Gerald started with a friendly handshake, saying he'd been expecting Marcus. They talked about the tradition and what Gerald had learned. Gerald revealed that about 20 years ago, Virginia had been with Thomas Hayes for a week. He didn't like it, but it was similar to what he had experienced when he was 18. Marcus spent some time carefully laying out Virginia's admission of multiple week-long arrangements, asking if it was possible. Gerald was upset but said he'd always had an inkling that something else was going on. Commercial fishing trips provided ample opportunity for Virginia. Marcus asked Gerald if he knew about his daughter's actions. Gerald confirmed that Virginia and Lydia were inseparable, but they had tried to hide information from him. A week before Marcus left for Boston, they'd said the plan was already set. Lydia sat at the kitchen table, unable to look at Marcus. I can't believe that my dad is going to divorce my mom, and that we're the reason for this. Virginia made her own bed. Your father would never agree to this level of deceit and lies. She still denies everything, even though Thomas Hayes admitted the truth, and he's not the only one. After a long silence, Lydia whispered, I know, and that's why I think I should tell you something. Marcus didn't answer. I'm sorry, Marcus, but I made an arrangement with Garrett. The explosion Lydia expected never came. And last year with Colton Hayes? Lydia nodded silently. Marcus couldn't think of what to say. Please, Marcus, this shouldn't change us. We've had 22 fantastic years. How can you say that? This changes everything. I'm so sorry, Marcus. I thought I had to fulfill family obligations. Marcus was seething with anger. What nonsense. You just wanted to sleep with another man. You did it and enjoyed it so much that you repeated it again. It wasn't like that. It was a duty, an obligation. So you didn't enjoy it? Lydia blushed deeply. Besides having a night with another man, lying to you, knowing what happened, and keeping my clueless husband in the dark, you might be right. Marcus and Virginia both winced at his sarcastic response. Then Virginia spoke. Why don't we all give ourselves time to calm down and discuss everything? Now all the cards are on the table as they should be, and nothing has happened yet. Lydia stayed at their house, but they hardly spoke. Marcus just couldn't understand why Lydia thought she needed to go through with this. He expected her to simply give up on the idea, but she seemed obsessed with the island's tradition, regardless of the cost to their relationship. Lydia insisted that if everything was out in the open, everything would be better. She promised to be honest with Marcus, even if it meant difficult conversations. Marcus was partly surprised by her absolute conviction that such an arrangement wouldn't affect their relationship. Virginia returned on Wednesday while Lydia was in town, and he suspected they had agreed upon the time between themselves. Can we talk, Marcus? Marcus nodded toward the kitchen table, and they sat down. First of all, I'd like to apologize. This shouldn't have happened, and it's my fault, not Lydia's, Marcus replied. Lydia is more than capable of making her own decisions, and this decision seems to have already been made, regardless of my opinion. She loves you very much, and is confident that you're strong enough as a couple to get through this. Marcus answered grimly. In fact, you both don't notice how much this affects me. This is a real betrayal. I wasn't here when I was 18, and unlike everyone else, I didn't live my life knowing this could happen to my wife. I naively believed that my wife would be faithful to me, as in wedding vows. I understand, Marcus, and it must be incredibly difficult. Let me explain how differently we look at things. We don't see it as infidelity. It's really important to us, and I know Lydia sees it as a way to get back into the island community. After a short silence, Virginia continued, What will you do if she agrees to this? Marcus sighed, not wanting to say the words, but said anyway, I won't stand for it. Virginia seemed to weigh the situation before speaking. What if there's a way to even things out? Maybe give you the opportunity to experience what you missed when you were 18. Marcus must have looked as confused as he felt. Virginia continued, I talked to 2 other elders. We agreed that the elders would offer you an arrangement similar to what Lydia is doing. A realization finally flashed through Marcus's mind. Are you suggesting that I spend time with Rosemary Caldwell or Ruth Fraser? Memories of meeting these 2 women flashed through Marcus's head. Rosemary, a widow from a young age. Marcus assumed she was about his wife's age, with long black hair and deep brown eyes. She maintained a trim figure and was certainly an attractive woman. Marcus didn't know Ruth Fraser that well but knew she was happily married and related to the Hayes family. She was the principal of a small school, with reddish-blonde curly hair and a more voluptuous figure, often showing ample cleavage. Marcus looked up from his memories. Yes, Marcus. The elders are willing to offer this, and I hope it shows you how much this all means to us. We didn't just put Lydia in this position carelessly. Despite the obvious temptation, Marcus thought the whole proposal was absurd. You're an amazing woman, Virginia, and you're also an elder, aren't you? Are you also on the menu? Virginia hesitated, not sure if Marcus was serious. If this is what you need, Marcus, then yes, I agree. I will not be the one responsible for the loss of centuries-old traditions. Marcus shook his head, amazed at the lengths Virginia would go to. He had a terrible feeling about how he would try to explain this arrangement to his own father. You know, Virginia, some traditions have outlived their time, and it's right that they should fade away. Virginia's smile faded. Our offer stands, Marcus, and you won't be disappointed. I can guarantee that. Think carefully. When Marcus relayed the story to Lydia, she already seemed to know about the elder's proposal, but Virginia's inclusion left her in shock and crying. I never thought she would consider this. It's all too much. I won't do it, Marcus. All this must stop. Marcus felt a wave of relief, finally admitting that this whole scenario was just bizarre. Thank God. I can't tell you how glad I am. I thought this would be our end. Lydia cried and spent most of the night either apologizing or repeating how much she loved Marcus. The situation remained awkward and uncertain, with Marcus still struggling with Lydia's previous intentions and her view that the arrangement was reasonable. On Friday, Virginia returned, clearly furious about Lydia's reconsideration, accusing Marcus of being a manipulative bully and an outsider who could never understand. Marcus was tired of the ranting. Why don't you be honest, Virginia, and admit that for you this is just a way to humiliate your husband? Virginia almost lost control. Okay, if you want to know the truth, we have a great time. A fit young guy in our bed doing exactly what we say. When we say it, it's a dream come true. We give them everything repeatedly, and everyone in the Hayes family is gifted. Can you believe it? Lydia made a sound. God, Mom, shut up. You're ruining everything. Marcus responded with a bitter laugh. Don't stop her. This is the most honest thing I've heard from her. Virginia wanted to say something else, but Lydia stopped her, asking her to leave and not come back until she respected her decision. It was the first time Marcus had seen Lydia confront Virginia, and he couldn't tell who was more shocked when Virginia stormed out of the house. Over the next few weeks, the situation remained difficult. Lydia constantly apologized for even considering the arrangement and for asking Marcus to accept it. She said she had been bound to the tradition by her mother and hadn't thought about the consequences. Marcus was in a dilemma about going to Boston for work. He couldn't put it off any longer, but the thought of leaving Lydia on the island terrified him. Lydia sensed his anxiety and insisted on going with him, taking time off from work. The rift with her mother grew even greater. They didn't speak, and Lydia never mentioned the tradition again. After much thought and worry, Marcus decided he needed to trust Lydia and make the trip alone. Lydia again tried to convince Marcus that she could come with him, but he knew she was in the middle of working on a major marketing proposal and needed time to prepare. Lydia promised daily calls and frequent contact. Lydia hesitated, knowing she was on very dangerous ground. Everything was ordinary, not like ours. Just physical, not lovemaking. It was one time. It won't happen again. Only this wasn't a one-time thing. You did it twice. You spent a week with both Hayes brothers when they were barely 18, which makes you nothing more than a... Lydia recoiled from Marcus's verbal attack. I'm not like that. I was supporting a tradition, part of educating young men on their path to manhood. That's all. They were very grateful. Lydia realized she had made another mistake as soon as she said this. Marcus shouted, "Oh, I bet they were damn grateful. You say it was one time, but how many times did you do this with each of them? Tell me. If I'm 18 years old, eager to please, and I have a woman available for the evening and all night, it has to be at least 5 times a day. So maybe 35 times a week? It's unlikely to be just once." Lydia couldn't deny it. Both Colton and Garrett had been eager to please. There was very little instruction required, though some patience was needed at the beginning of each week. She had enjoyed their youthful, athletic bodies, just as her mother had predicted. At one point, Garrett had even admitted he was in love with her. It was the only time it occurred to her that a week could affect her normal life and the marriage she treasured. She had wasted no time explaining to Garrett the reality of the situation. Marcus's flow of speech continued. And what exactly does an 18-year-old need instruction in these days? I bet they knew what to do from day one, and you couldn't get enough, could you? Lydia sobbed. It's not like that. It was supposed to be a fun adventure. It was just physical. I know it hurts your ego, but I only want you. You're the one who makes me complete. Marcus grew angrier. I'd say it's more about trust and vows than ego. What about your wedding vows? Does tradition trump them? It's not ego when your life partner betrays you. And for what? Not for anything serious or with serious consequences, but for the sake of traditional intimacy with some kids. Lydia blushed. I understand you're angry and upset with me, but you're strong enough for us to get through this. After Colton, you didn't notice anything. We became closer. I thought it would be the same with Garrett. How was I to know? Because I trusted the woman I loved selflessly. Believe me, I will never do anything like that again. Should I believe you? You must be joking. Lydia almost shouted back. You can. I swear I'm really sorry that I hurt you. Think about the wonderful life we still have ahead. We can go back to the way things were. Did you think about our wonderful life when you were planning all this and lying in bed with them? No. I would never have considered this if I'd known the consequences. I would never intentionally hurt you. But you did it anyway. I know, and I'm really sorry. And what do you think will come of this? Lydia didn't know what to say. Obviously, you don't understand how I feel. You tore out my heart and soul. How the hell can you fix this? With that, Marcus stormed off before he did something he would regret. He just kept walking, trying to clear his head. The beauty of the evening sunset did little to improve his mood. When he turned back toward the village, he was surprised to meet Elder Rosemary Caldwell. Marcus could barely return the greeting with a nod. Rosemary smiled and admitted that their meeting was not accidental. She had seen Marcus go out onto the path leading to the cliffs and knew she would be able to catch up with him when he returned. Rosemary offered to sit on a rock ledge, then cautiously asked Marcus if he would tell her anything about his circumstances. Marcus saw no reason for silence and told her everything. Saying it out loud did not lift the weight off his shoulders. Rosemary listened attentively without interrupting. He was hesitant to mention Virginia's offer to have one of the elders spend time with him in exchange for Lydia fulfilling her obligations, but decided that Rosemary had played a part in the whole saga and included it for context. When he finished, Rosemary was silent for a long time before she spoke. Marcus, I did not make such an offer. Virginia never mentioned or discussed any arrangements with me or Ruth. This is not something we could consider. I can only think that Virginia was trying to get you to admit or agree to intimacy with others outside of marriage to justify what they had planned. Marcus was puzzled by her answer. Rosemary continued, One more thing, Marcus. These arrangements mostly disappeared decades ago, and even then it was only for the first night, never a week. The only arrangements that lasted a week were for housework or planting, with one night together at the end. Maybe Eleanor and Virginia acted on their own. Marcus just shook his head. Every time he began to come to terms with his wife's behavior, a new shock occurred. Rosemary continued by saying that she would speak with Ruth and take the necessary steps to ensure that Virginia was stripped of her elder status. As far as she knew, this had never happened before, and it would be a scandal. But Virginia's actions were unforgivable. Nowadays, elders must engage in social activities and support the inhabitants of the island. Rosemary looked at Marcus. What are you going to do? Marcus shrugged. I can't make her understand the consequences of her actions, but I'd like her to feel what I feel now. They sat in silence for a while before Marcus noticed a faint smile at the corner of Rosemary's mouth. What is it you're thinking about? Rosemary's smile widened. What if you stay with me for a week? Hear me out, we shouldn't tell Lydia and Virginia about this. We'll say that I feel honored to accept the arrangement that was offered on my behalf as an elder. So you give Lydia a taste of her own medicine, and I get to torment Virginia for dragging my name into all this nonsense. Marcus was delighted at this prospect but asked, Won't this ruin your reputation? I'm still a married man, and everyone will think. Rosemary interrupted him. First of all, I don't care what people think. And secondly, I'm sorry to say this, but almost the entire island already knows about your situation, Marcus. The thought of everyone knowing was another blow, but it was replaced by a pleasant thought that Marcus shared with Rosemary. You know what? I would love to plant some trees for you. This will give Lydia and Virginia a pause. They laughed together and quickly settled all the details. Marcus returned to his home and quickly packed his things. All he explained to Lydia was that, on reflection, he had decided to accept her mother's kind offer regarding an island elder, and under the circumstances, a week with another woman would be more than reasonable. He left Lydia crying and begging him not to do it. His stay with Rosemary was surprisingly comfortable. She was great company and a wonderful cook. Marcus spent time renovating the house and actually planted some trees in the backyard. They discussed Marcus's situation. He hoped this week would give Lydia some insight into how he was feeling, until he saw signs that convinced him Lydia understood how wrong her actions were. There was no chance for them to reconcile. True to his word, he never slept with Rosemary, although they came very close a couple of times, and it was not due to a lack of desire. It was not long before Lydia caught up with Rosemary at the village store and immediately began to reproach her for having an affair with her husband. Rosemary smiled sweetly. "Lydia, dear, you of all people should know that this is not an affair. It's an arrangement, and it won't affect your marriage." Lydia heard an echo of her own words but continued, "You can't do this. He's my husband. In fact, I'm fulfilling the offer made by your own mother on my behalf. What was there for me, Ruth, or even your mom? For a week. I think Marcus made his choice, and I'm obliged to honor the tradition. Could have been worse. He could have chosen Virginia. I promise to return him safe and sound, although he may be a little exhausted." Lydia gasped. You old," Rosemary answered calmly. "I would have thought that name would be more appropriate for one of us who slept with two 18-year-old boys behind her faithful husband's back." With that, Rosemary walked off, leaving Lydia with her mouth open as everyone in the village store stared at her. The next day, an enraged and hysterical Lydia made a worthy attempt to kick down Rosemary's front door before Marcus opened it. "Please, Marcus, I'm so sorry. Come home. I'm just doing what you did. Why are you so upset?" "Because, like you said, this shouldn't concern us. I had no idea. It's just cruel. Torments me. I can't stop thinking about you and that old woman." Marcus replied, "Yes, it sounds familiar. Welcome to my world." He quickly slammed the door. Marcus returned to his home the following week and was greeted by a much more reserved Lydia. Lydia began, "I can't believe you did this to me, but I can forgive you if you can. I understand how you feel about all this. That's just what you think. You've still only experienced part of it, not the deception and lies. Our entire time here is based on lies." Lydia persisted. "We're still the same people, the same marriage. That inspired you to jump into bed with other men? A marriage that you destroyed? And I still can't understand why you did it. Are you really that tired of me? It was never about you or boredom. If we can't go back, we can build something new. Let's look forward to all those retirement dreams, to the things we could have together, travel, grandchildren. We can still do it all. We still love each other, no matter what. It's not over yet, Marcus. I will do anything to prove my love for you." Marcus stayed in the house in the spare room, almost overcome with frightening thoughts about what the hell he would do with his life if he left Lydia. He couldn't decide whether failure or the abyss best described his prospects. It was easier to stay, and he still loved her. Given the consequences, he doubted Lydia's actions would be repeated. The island was idyllic, and he had dreamed of traveling. Spent years planning his options and sharing those dreams with Lydia. Did he really want to give it all up? Lydia wondered how it had all come to this. It was also confusing when her mother first proposed the arrangement. She had rejected the offer, but Virginia continued to pressure her for several months. Then she saw Colton Hayes at a dance. He was very handsome and delightfully respectful. She danced with him several times at social events, and they got along well. Virginia told her about her own arrangements and how exciting they were. She talked about it as a free romantic adventure and never viewed it as an affair. It was just tradition. Despite this, she knew Marcus didn't think so. She told herself if he never found out, it wouldn't hurt him. The week with Colton had been wonderful. During the day he planted trees, and the evenings they spent together. He was very nervous but very charming and so eager to please. By the end of the week, she had guided him well. The week filled her with confidence. She felt she had rediscovered her attractiveness, which had faded during the long years of motherhood. Was it tradition or just illicit intimacy, as Marcus suggested? She had to admit it was both. But didn't she deserve a little satisfaction after spending 22 years raising children and being a good wife? She was sure it didn't hurt her relationship with Marcus. Things had never been so good. She loved him more than ever, and after that week, they had been more intimate. Garrett was even more handsome, and she couldn't help but feel aroused at the thought of taking him to her bed. Marcus was always smart and had uncovered the tradition. Aunt Eleanor's memoirs. Damn them for giving it all away. Lydia and her mother had tried to convince Marcus to agree, but he hadn't gone for it. Come to think of it, her decision to go behind his back was the worst she had ever made. However, she was confident that when the pain subsided, she would be able to bring Marcus back. She just needed to remind him of how good they had it together and of their future aspirations. He would also want to stay together for the sake of their daughters and future grandchildren, and this angle could help her case. To Marcus's surprise, their daughters arrived on the island 2 days later. Savannah wasted no time criticizing Marcus for his terrible behavior toward her mother, pointing out that the idea of living apart was simply ridiculous. Bethany seemed to be holding back, waiting for more information. Marcus noticed a slight smile on Lydia's face. Had he not noticed her manipulations and lies over the years? Apparently, she thought he wouldn't tell his daughters anything about their mother's actions, protecting them first, as always. All of Marcus's doubts were cleared. Lydia was wrong, completely wrong. Marcus raised his voice in a way his daughters could never remember. Your mother has been having affairs for 2 weeks with boys, younger than both of you. In fact, she doesn't seem to understand that I will never accept this behavior. Lydia immediately denied this, saying that Marcus had misunderstood the situation and that the men were simply doing landscaping work. Marcus had to admit she was good, almost convincing even him. Both girls knew something was wrong, but what their father suggested was too far-fetched. Perhaps he was starting to go a little crazy. Marcus might agree with that last thought, but he suggested they invite Grandpa Gerald or the elders to help decide who was telling the truth. Lydia fainted, or rather, she pretended to. It wasn't very convincing. All three just looked at her in bewilderment and waited for an equally poorly conceived recovery. Marcus looked at her with contempt. I can never trust you again. It's all over. There's no turning back or moving forward. How will you feel when you look in the mirror and know that you betrayed me? Nothing can erase that. And how will I feel looking in the same mirror if I accept this? We need each other, Marcus. We always depended on each other. It made each of us stronger. I'm right for you, and deep down you still know it. Don't throw away your life to punish me. I can handle it, Lydia, but I won't let you destroy me. I'll build a new life. We all have to live with our decisions and be true to ourselves. You'll have to live with the fact that you cheated, lied, and threw away what we had. I'll live with the fact that I left the woman I love, but you're not the one I took you for. Not the good and kind person I fell in love with. I would like to have her back, but not you. Marcus left the island with his daughters and decided to rent an apartment closer to their university. The girls were shocked by the behavior of their mother and grandmother. He never returned. His last act was to burn the trees in the orchard. Lydia looked at the orange glow with tears in her eyes. Gerald helped Marcus sell the house because Lydia didn't have enough money to maintain it. The divorces of Virginia and Lydia became a scandal and predetermined the fate of the remnants of the tradition. Virginia became the first to be removed from her position as an elder. Both she and Lydia became outcasts. No woman trusted them or befriended them, but despite this, they resolutely continued to live on their island. A few months later, Rosemary Caldwell resigned as elder. Residents of the island noticed that she divided her time between being on and off the island. Eventually, she began to come only for a couple of weeks a year. When asked about this, she confirmed that she lived with her family somewhere near a place called Burlington, Vermont. Thank you for your viewing. See you next time. If you enjoyed this, subscribe to JK Tells a Story for more tales.